How's it going, everyone? It's Foxxy here, and today we'll be taking a look at a game I've been meaning to review ever since it came out. That, of course, is Call of Juarez The Cartel. The game was released in mid-2011 for the PS3, 360, and the PC. This is the third game in the franchise. It's also the first and only to be set in modern day. Now, for those of you who don't know, the previous two games and the one that came out after The Cartel were all set in the Old West. Why the sudden change to modern day? I don't know, I can't say for sure. Maybe they wanted to do something similar to Call of Duty by making a change to the setting of the game to freshen things up like they did with the original Modern Warfare. The problem for Call of Juarez is not only did it fail to do this, it pissed off a lot, if not most, of its core fans. I might be wrong here, but the only thing I believe links the cartel with the other Call of Juarez games is that Ben McCall, who is one of the main characters of this game, has the same last name as Billy and Ray McCall from the previous ones. I assume this means that Ben is possibly a descendant of some sort. I don't know, and honestly it doesn't really matter since it's never brought up in the game at all. The cartel's story is slightly complicated, but the basic premise is that a DEA office was bombed by some unknown force. Shane Dixon, who is a higher-up, orders the three main playable characters, Ben McCall, Kim Evans, and Eddie Gora, I believe that's how it's pronounced, to figure out who was the one who did the bombings. Of course, along the way you come into various problems, enemies, and constant bickering amongst the three characters. The actual story would have been pretty damn good, except for one major flaw. All of the characters in the game are beyond unlikable. Everyone yells and bitches about every little thing, whether it be in a cutscene or during a firefight. It does not matter. Seriously, this is all the people do for the entire game, and it's absolutely infuriating. There's a total of 15 chapters to the story, and it took me about 5 to 6 hours to complete. To be honest, I thought it took me much longer because the story started to drag on around halfway through. But no, it's really not that long of a game. The graphics of The Cartel received a ton of harsh criticism from a large variety of game sites, magazines, and other reviewers. Me personally, while I can't say the game looks ungodly bad, there are a ton of flaws to point out. For one, the character models are recycled all over the place, which starts to become very apparent when you arrive at the strip club in Chapter 2. You end up seeing the same exact woman model over and over again, but with slight differences such as hair and skin color, different clothes, minor stuff like that. And while I'm talking about the character models, everyone looks so incredibly unrealistic and wooden. Their expressions don't really change all that much, plus the voice acting and mouth movement doesn't even attempt to sync up right.
I understand you introduced Nicole Hart to a friend of yours right before she disappeared. I want his name and I want to know where to find him.
Fuck off!
I don't have time for this shit. Who the fuck is he?
Ah! Oh, let me go!
Who is he, Tina?
Okay, Javier.
There's also a ton of weird bugs, like shadows appearing and randomly disappearing for no apparent reason, textures getting extremely pixelated when looking at a fire, and the most annoying thing by far is that the game freezes for a second or two constantly, for again, no apparent reason. Now alright, a lot of games will freeze when you get to a checkpoint and the autosave kicks in. In fact, this still happens to this day on games on the PS4 and Xbox One. That's at least somewhat understandable. In this game, it's completely random. You don't have to be in a firefight or in a major area where a lot of shit is going on. You could just be walking down an alleyway and boom, it freezes. I think what went wrong here is that Techland, who developed the game, decided to rush out the release of The Cartel, which is made very obvious during the cutscenes and, well, just by playing the game in general. If they actually took some time to polish stuff over, the game could have looked quite good, but instead this is what we have. The sound is a mix of good and bad. I really like the music and the sound effects are perfectly fine. The voice acting isn't terrible either necessarily. Sure, for the most part it's pretty bad, but I can easily believe that part of the reason is due to the horrific dialogue. It's one of the worst things about the game too. The characters spew the same few lines over and over. Fuck, shit, and bitch is thrown around, 100 or more times per chapter, and some of the shit they have these characters saying is not only pointless, but random. For example,
I did not come to bring peace, but a motherfucking sword. And I saw a pale horse, and he who sits upon it, and his name is Death. And he has a bullet.
Please tell me why you would ever say this. Ever. To hear yourself talk? I can't even imagine that. It's just way too unnecessary for anyone to ever say in real life. The gameplay for the most part is that of a typical first-person shooter. There's a few different things like the breach and clear moments, which would have been very nice if you didn't have to do them 30 times throughout the entirety of the game. Having like 5 or so would have at least been somewhat memorable, I guess, but it happens so often that it comes off as mundane. Another thing we didn't need so much of is the fucking awful driving segments. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you have to do one of these every single chapter, sometimes even more than once. They're annoying, they're boring, and the cars drive so goddamn slow. The top speed on the dashboard remains at 0 the entire time. I don't know if someone at Techland has a boner for car chases, but these were like the opposite of any meaning to the word fun. And that's the gameplay's biggest issue. Everything is just so mind-numbingly repetitive. You end up doing the same things over and over to the point where every mission plays out almost exactly the same. Kill some enemies, move forward, kill more enemies, cutscene, breach and clear, move forward, kill more enemies again, car chase, blah blah blah, rinse, recycle, repeat. Interestingly, the mechanics of the game are surprisingly really good. Aiming and moving around is nice and fluid, buttons are responsive, there's just one tiny little thing I don't like. In a lot of shooters, for whatever reason, the developers feel it's necessary to put in a slow-mo feature. This is one of those games. For example, when you kill enough enemies, your concentration bar will fill up. When you press the concentration button, your character says something incredibly stupid, and the game will go into a slow-mo, allowing your guns to somehow shoot faster. Sometimes a slow motion feature is pretty cool, like in the Fear games or even Sniper Elite. In the Cartel, it just had me asking why it even exists. Now again, let me make this perfectly clear. This is a nitpicky complaint. Me personally, I'm just tired of seeing this feature on games that don't need to have it. Yeah, I guess you could say Fear didn't need to have it, but the thing is, it added something to Fear. It adds nothing to the Cartel other than for the sake of simply being there.
I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and I will bathe the blood of my motherfucking
There's a pretty good assortment of weapons, each of course having their own various stats, as we're all used to. However, I can't say that I felt that much of a difference between the MP5 and the Uzi, outside of maybe the magazine size and recoil. You unlock more guns by progressing through the story and collecting secrets in the game. Oh, and I didn't mention before, each character has their own unique ability. Ben can reload revolvers extremely quick, Eddie can dual-wield SMGs, and Kim can zoom in with her guns further than the other two. I'll give them a little credit with this. I like that they gave each character a unique ability rather than leaving them with nothing at all. I would have loved to have gone into detail about the multiplayer portion of this game, but unfortunately that's impossible due to the fact no one plays it. I remember a few years back I tried the multiplayer for a couple of hours and actually kind of enjoyed it. Most critics didn't like it, but whatever, it never really bothered me. Oh well, it's not like you're really missing out or anything. And so that's Call of Juarez The Cartel. It's a game that simply doesn't need to exist. Even the developer trashed this game, saying, and I quote, "Call of Juarez The Cartel was an unfinished mistake." The biggest question on my mind is, why is this a Call of Juarez game in the first place? Because one of the main characters dresses up sort of like a cowboy and shares the same last name from a character in the previous ones? Why couldn't this have just been named The Cartel or some shit? I don't think it was the cash in on the franchise because Call of Juarez is not a popular title at all. I don't know, I don't get it. If you're a fan of Call of Juarez games, just do yourself a favor and either skip this one entirely or wait until it hits the dollar bin at whatever game store you shop at.